Welcome back to the Karma Compass, the podcast where we cut through the noise and get real about the struggles we're all navigating. I'm your host, Karma, and today we're diving into a topic that too many of us have lived through, but not enough people are talking about. Why getting the right diagnosis and treatment feels like a damn obstacle course. If you've ever felt like medications you were being given didn't help, or even made things worse, or if you ever struggled to find a therapist who actually knows what they're doing, then this episode is for you. We're talking about misdiagnosis, medication side effects, and the ridiculous amount of gatekeeping that keeps the best treatments out of reach. And of course, we're going to address how masking, especially for black women, leaves us undiagnosed, misdiagnosed, and untreated for years. Because let's be real, the system isn't just broken, it was never designed to work for us in the first place. And somehow, the burden of fixing it keeps falling on the very people it's failing. All right, let's get into it. The wrong meds for the wrong diagnosis. So let's start with misdiagnosis because honestly, half the battle of getting effective treatment is getting the right diagnosis in the first place. I can't tell you how many people I know, including myself, who've spent years being treated for the wrong thing. You go to the doctor because something isn't right, and instead of actually listening, they just slap a label on you and throw a prescription your way. Let's talk about what happens when you're diagnosed with depression when you actually have ADHD or autism. Instead of getting treatment that actually helps, you're handed something that numbs you into oblivion. For me, it happened when I experienced what I now know 20 years later was the most extreme case of an autistic shutdown. I had been working 80-hour weeks while also being in the most turbulent relationship of my life. And one day, I just broke. I was rendered completely non functional. That was my first autistic meltdown or shutdown. But of course, no one saw it that way. With no previous history of extreme mental health episodes or any clear evidence, I was diagnosed as bipolar and placed on Seroquel. I remember sleeping at least 16 hours a day, feeling nothing but drowsiness. I couldn't think, couldn't act, couldn't even put two words together. It was terrifying. But because my insurance was an HMO, there was only one mental health system I could go through, and I was stuck. No second opinions until I could switch my coverage. And guess what? When I finally did move on, that diagnosis was never validated or confirmed by any other professionals. Over the years, I've learned that bipolar disorder is one of the most overdiagnosed conditions, especially for women. Many people who are actually struggling with borderline personality disorder or autism get mixed diagnosed with bipolar instead. And that's a big deal because treating someone for a brain disease like bipolar when they actually have a personality disorder or a developmental condition is a huge mistake. For example, borderline personality disorder, otherwise known as BPD, is caused by trauma and attachment issues. And the most effective treatment isn't medication, it's dialectical behavior therapy, also known as DBT. The same goes for autism, which affects social, emotional, and interpersonal skills. And is also best treated with therapy based modalities, not medication. And interesting enough, BPD and autism, like so many conditions, have overlapping symptoms. According to the NIH, 31.7% of autistic women have been misdiagnosed with personality disorders, compared to only 16.7% of men. And the SAC Center reports that women are underdiagnosed for autism while being overdiagnosed for BPD. That's exactly why the DSM 5, the therapist Bible, List related conditions alongside each diagnosis to help prevent mistakes like this. But here's the real kicker. Medications like Seroquel and lithium, which are used to treat bipolar disorder, can have permanent harmful effects if used improperly. And what's more improper than using them to treat a condition that doesn't even exist? This is why the cycle of trial and error treatment is so dangerous. When people are put on the wrong meds, they can start absorbing symptoms from the medications themselves. Instead of getting better, their condition worsens. And that leads us into segment 2, the cost of side effects. Now, if you've ever taken medication for mental health, you already know side effects can be a whole other beast. Let's just go down the list, shall we? Lethargy, brain fog, numbness, emotional flatlining, weight gain, loss of sex drive, insomnia, extreme drowsiness, and my personal favorite, being prescribed something that literally makes your original symptoms worse. And yet, we go back and tell our doctors that the meds aren't working or that they're actually making things worse. And we're hit with, well, let's just increase the dose. Or let's try this pill on top of the other pill. Like we're some kind of science experiment instead of actual human beings. And this is the point where a lot of people just give up on treatment entirely. Because when the solution is making you feel worse, what's the point? But here's where it can get even more frustrating. Because even when you do find a medication that works, there's a whole other battle waiting for you. Gatekeeping and the politics of medication. All right, let's talk about the gatekeeping of mental health treatment. Because the way our healthcare system is set up, the best treatments, the ones that could actually change lives, are locked behind a paywall. Let's start with therapy. If you want a therapist who actually knows what they're doing and specializes in things like ADHD, autism, trauma, or neurodivergence in general, you better have money. Because a lot of these therapists don't take insurance, or they only take the premium plans that most people don't have. And those that do often offer subpar care because they are overloaded, underpaid, new, and or unskilled. And then there's medication. Some of the most effective ADHD meds, expensive as hell. Certain antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds, insurance companies make it so hard to get them covered. And let's not even get into therapy modalities like EMDR or neurofeedback, because those are treated like luxury treatments when they should just be standard care. And this is what really pisses me off, because the people who need these treatments the most, the ones struggling to work, struggling to function, struggling to even get out of bed, struggling to find support, they're the ones being priced out. And instead, we're given the bare minimum, pills that don't work, therapists who don't listen, and a system that treats mental health like a privilege instead of a right. And now we need to talk about masking, the impact of masking, because this is one of the biggest reasons why so many people, especially Black women, go undiagnosed for years. Masking is when you learn to hide your symptoms so well that even doctors don't recognize them. You force yourself to function. You push through the burnout. You overcompensate. And because you look fine on the outside or present well, no one believes that you're struggling. And for Black women, it's even worse, because we're expected to be strong, to handle everything. So when we finally reach out for help, we're hit with, you're just stressed, or You're too high functioning to have ADHD or autism. And it's like, ma'am, I'm functioning because I have no choice, not because I'm not struggling. So, what can we do? How do we advocate for ourselves in a system that is clearly failing us? One way is through research and community. We have to keep talking, keep sharing our experiences, and keep demanding better care. Having spaces like this, where we can share our findings and learn from each other, makes all the difference. And listen, I get the whole self diagnosis argument, but here's my take. There is nothing wrong with walking into a doctor's office informed about your struggles and where your symptoms fit. If we can't get better providers, let's work better with the ones we do have. Let's make them step their game up, pull out their DSM 5s, and actually listen to us. That's it for today's episode. If this conversation resonated with you, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And full disclosure, I'm not a medical professional. I'm a member of the marginalized community, doing my best to create a community where we can thrive, not just survive.